Ayn Rand's 1943 publication, The Fountainhead, is not what you think it is. It's actually much more sophisticated and more philosophical than you can imagine. Rand is bold and merciless in the way she expresses these characters in the story and how she shows the hypocrisy of modern day society and man's attest to virtue as the highest possible ideal and value. And so this book really embodies a challenge to altruism, and it provides an interesting insight into an alternative to a perspective that is so broadly adopted by both the mainstream and by the common man. And I think that Ayn Rand really brings a challenge to people. And I think that's why she can kind of leave a bitter taste in some people's mouths, let's say, when they read this, because they feel very challenged at a deeply rooted idea in a society. And Ayn Rand does not stop in The Fountainhead. She dives deep into what she believes is the problem in modern society. The main character, Howard Rourke, is like a hammer in this novel. He is the ideal man of how Ayn Rand envisions a man should be, or how a man ought to be. He is in so many ways a genius. He's uncompromising. He's very stubborn, and he's very arrogant in some sense, because his vision of what he creates, because he's an architect, he wants it just to be his own, and he doesn't want any outside help to make it happen. When somebody uses Howard Rourke to design something, they hire only Howard Rourke. He has no outside influence. He is a true creator. And this is where objectivism comes into play. Objectivism ultimately means that people should live their lives in accordance to their own values and how and what they value. What I mean by this is essentially it's governed by individual rationality, and it's also governed by not doing actual harm to other people and not at the expense of other people. It's kind of like an ethical egoism, but it actually is a quite deeper and more sophisticated than that. That is because Rand actually has an entire philosophical system built around the idea of objectivism. For example, she thinks that art should be something that is rationally understood. You should be able to look at something and through a rational mind understand what it means. There is no abstract logic or abstract kind of imagery that has these underlying values or meanings. It looks like what it is. There's nothing hidden behind it. It makes sense because she kind of depicts this idea as the rationality of reality, and the way we understand it is very important in this philosophy. There are no hidden messages. What you see is what you get. Something that's not talked enough about in this book is how common man is depicted as this kind of conformist, virtue-seeking creature that doesn't really know or have a value system. And I think that Ayn Rand is actually right to depict this. I think that common man does truly hold an altruistic kind of perspective, and they're always looking out for each other, but they don't really know exactly what that means, and it's not really a concrete idea. And I think that liberalism is rooted in this idea that we're all out there to look out for each other. But what Ayn Rand does is she points out the major flaw in this, and that is that, one, people are not very satisfied, and two, that it's fake. That these virtues that people are pretending to care about are not actually things they care about. They just think that it will build their social score, or it's something that they should say. And it's not actually what they believe in. So Ayn Rand really captures this in her novel. And there's lots of examples with Peter Keating and the other antagonist, which is Ellsworth Toohey, who's a very interesting character that kind of embodies what some critics call collectivism as a whole. His character kind of embodies this idea that everyone is equal and egalitarian, when in fact it's not actually the case at all. Naturally, Ayn Rand grew up in Soviet Russia, and so she has a bitter taste about collectivism, and there's this underlying kind of theme throughout the book that collectivism is bad and that it does harm. And where she's not wrong when you look historically, that collectivism has caused a lot of harm in the past. Millions upon millions of lives have suffered, and or died because of these types of ideals. And so she's very merciless when she comes to critiquing this throughout the novel. And she critiques this as the fall of the ideal man, which she embodies in Howard Rourke, which is this guy that won't let anyone push him around and at any cost. And another theme I think that is worth talking about in the novel is that the importance of creating and not depending on others. And that's where you can kind of see this contrast of individualism and collectivism. And what Ayn Rand is saying is that when you are an individual and you're creating these new things, it's in the benefit of not only yourself, but it's also in the benefit of other people. Because throughout the novel, the collectivists kind of just keep feeding off of each other. And what she calls this in the novel is kind of interesting. She calls them second-handers. And she kind of means this in the sense that they're not men that can rely on themselves, they rely on other people. And Howard Rourke is the guy that he can rely on himself to do something and get things done, where the second-handers rely on this entire system of other hardworking people. And I like this idea because I think Ayn Rand kind of brings this unique perspective with her philosophy and bringing it into the book. And she really integrates it really well into the book if you want to understand kind of where she stands and what it means to be an objectivist. And so I would recommend anyone that's interested in objectivism to read this novel because it gives you kind of real life kind of examples or conversational ideas about what objectivism actually means. And so I can talk to you here about it and tell you about it. But really you have to read this novel to understand what objectivism is. Something that's always really important to consider when we're talking about philosophy specifically and ideal character traits such as Howard Rourke is that Howard Rourke isn't a real person. And it's just, he's the bar to set. He's like Jesus in Christianity in some sense, but for Ayn Rand's philosophy. Because to live like Howard Rourke would be very challenging for most people. Because most people would need to be a team player in their life, or they can't do it on their own for a variety of reasons, right? Life's complicated. But it's something to always consider, though, that when we're talking about these philosophical ideas, that Howard Rourke's actually not a real person, but he's the ideal of how a man ought to live. And I think that this is really important because people criticize Ayn Rand saying that it's not realistic. Well, it's like, well, of course it's not realistic. No one is going to be Jesus and be perfect and, die for other people's sins on the cross or something like that, right? Howard Rourke is willing to go the distance. He's a character that is uncompromising and he's confident, he's genius, and he is willing to do whatever it takes to claw his way into creating a better world how he envisions it. He's a visionary. And I think that we have to really consider this when we are looking at Ayn Rand's philosophy, that we don't necessarily have to be Howard Rourke, but it's something to strive for. It's something to strive for. It's something to do, to aim for. And so I think that when people are looking at objectivism as a serious philosophy to live their lives by, I think that they have to be rational and realistic and understand their own strengths. Not everyone is Howard Rourke, but it's sure good to aim to be that way, because you will never live a day of your life unsatisfied if you do. And not just that, but other people will benefit around you from not only your genius, your creativity, and your hard work, but it might even inspire people. And I think that is Ayn Rand's message here, using Howard Rourke as an inspirational figure to figure out your own life and to set the bar high and to not just be a conformist and to step up and be the man that you know you could be. So I really like Ayn Rand. I really like this book. I really like objectivism. I'm going to make another video here, and it's going to be kind of challenging objectivism using amor fati. Anyway, that's for next time, guys. Likes, comments, all the things below. Till next time.